Today on the podcast, you'll hear my interview with Alexandra Gardner, a composer who also coaches composers. I found her insight on her world of composing and support for others to be fascinating. Composer Alexandra Gardner creates music for varied instrumentations and often mixes acoustic instruments with electronics, drawing inspiration from topics including mythology, the natural sciences, and her training as a percussionist. Her music is performed extensively throughout the US and in Europe at venues such as the Warsaw Autumn Festival, Beijing Modern Festival, the Library of Congress, and the Kennedy Center. She was a visiting composer for 2 years at the Phonos Foundation in Barcelona, Spain, and served as composer in residence for the Seattle Symphony. In addition to her composing activities, Alexandra maintains a private teaching studio and consulting business. She helps composers lead creative and fruitful musical lives through consulting, mentoring, and teaching essential business and communication skills. She presents masterclasses and workshops at colleges and universities around the U.S. and facilitates dialogue and discussion related to artistic career development and the nature of creativity. I know that you will love this conversation. Alexandra Gardner, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Hi, Jennet. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so delighted to speak with you. I always love talking with composers, especially because they're so creative and interesting and think about their art and their creativity in a different way than I do. So I'm really looking forward to this. And before we, dive into the hard-hitting journalism that is to come, would you just start out by introducing yourself to the listeners and tell a little bit of the story that brings us to this point in your career?
Sure. I'm a composer. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I write concert music for ensembles like string quartet and orchestra, and I also make electronic music, which I often combine with instrumental music. So a substantial part of my catalog is electroacoustic pieces for instrument with electronics. My career has been a long and winding journey of my own construction. It has included working extensively with modern dance as well as theater and other forms of art and media. I spent 2 years living in Barcelona, Spain, and working as a composer there. And I've served as composer in residence with the Seattle Symphony. And currently I compose and teach privately both composition and business and communication skills to other composers. So yeah, that's kind of what's up.
Wow. Like that, it's so many things. And like, if I can sort of back up and pull the threads a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
it is beautiful to hear that a living composer has been able to like make a career that includes living in Barcelona and having numerous pieces like actually existing out in the world and being a composer in residence, which feels like an extraordinarily high profile thing to do. And if I'm listening to this and I'm, 20 years old and I'm 28 years old and I'm like 35 and I'm like, well, where are my opportunities? Um, where do these come from? How do you get from being like a kid in music school to being the composer in residence for the Seattle Symphony, a large and legit organization?
That's a great question. It takes a long time and a lot of hard work and also a lot of serendipity. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I didn't start composing until college. And until then though I had, studied piano and I was very involved with music and I loved it. It just really had not occurred to me to like be a composer and that I could make my own music. And so I was a music major in college. It was a liberal arts college, not conservatory or anything like that. And I realized, actually, I didn't realize my introduction to composing was through experimental music and electronic music and the music of like Pauline Oliveros and Laurie Anderson and crazy New York City DIY circuit building, people. And that was what initially, got me into it. And then I, became a music major and learned, how to write things down and how the instruments worked and carried on from there. But I realized very early that I didn't wish to do the standard composer career path, which is, you will get a bachelor's and then you will get a master's and then you will get a doctorate and then you will be a professor. That wasn't, that was actually, it was not even presented to me in college. And it was only afterwards in grad school that I was like, wait, I'm supposed to do that. I don't actually want to do that. And so I got my master's degree and went off on my own and the goal was always to just keep making music. However, do the things that I felt called to do and work with people that I felt were a good fit to work with. And, I just started from there and kept doing things and meeting people and keeping in touch with people I met. And, just slowly started to, snowball into, I have a pretty good portfolio of works. And then it got bigger and then other people were interested in it. And I applied for things and a few of those things I actually received. And so it's just been a really sort of exercise in going to things and meeting people and talking to them and making the things that I wanted to make with the people that I wanted to make them with. And eventually that led to crazy stuff like, getting to work with the Seattle Symphony.
I mean, it sounds so organic and simple and linear as you describe it, and no doubt it doesn't feel like that when you're in the middle of it. But I wanted to really highlight the thing that you said about choosing to sort of DIY your career rather than like going for the credential, the next credential, the next credential, finally the like professorial job, the peak of achievement, which for you're exactly right, for a lot of people is the path that they see in front of them.
Right.
But how brave to step out and say, oh, no, I can make my career as a creator of works that nobody asked for, yet. How bold to declare that this is something that I do, this is something that I can offer to the world, and by meeting people, by collaborating with them, by like working from project to project to project, I can build my career to like a significant place, to be making my living as a composer. What?
Yeah, I mean, that is how it went. I can say that it was not especially linear, but it feels like, cycle after cycle after strangely sized cycle of work and things happening and things not happening and,
Yeah.
forward steps and backward steps and all kinds of things. But yes, it it didn't feel like a really bold choice to me because fortunately when I was young, I was presented with people who had done that.
Nice. Yeah.
So I had examples.
Representation matters.
Representation, yes, from people and also, women composers who I admired and thought they were doing interesting things. And well, if they can do their interesting things and they're doing okay, maybe I can do my interesting things too. Let me try.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Can I pull the thread and ask about your electronic music? You described your music as electroacoustic, and in my imagination, like when I think about a composer, because I am, firmly ensconced in the world of classical music and I play a lot of new repertoire, but like as an oboist, as a classical oboist. And so the music world that I see is all made up of instrumentalists who play their acoustic instruments unamplified for an audience, and generally playing music of dead composers. Um, is there a mass of people? Is there a community of people who are the players of electronic instruments, or the like proponents of, like, where does the critical mass of people come from to work with in the realm that you want to work with, and what called you to work in the realm that you want to work in? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah. So now a lot of the performers that I work with are classical musicians, because I think, it's 2025 and there's more understanding that, amplified music can be a good thing and can be fun to play. And there can be, it's like sort of a multimedia. I think the community is starting to value multimedia sorts of experiences more. So
Yeah.
that's nice. Earlier, I sort of went back and forth between, the classical community, because I'm classically trained. So, that's a fit between the classical community and then the sort of electronic music communities. There are many. There's the sort of like techno thing, which is not really my thing, but I like it and it's fun. There is the experimental, like, let's build our own stuff and make weird squeaks and bloops and honks, and that's fun too in a different way. So there are lots of different sort of pockets of this kind of work. I started doing it in the really through working with modern dance. I did several years of just straight up electronic music for dancers, because that's what they, wanted. And then as I was able to work with more established groups, they would sometimes have live musicians come in, and then we would work together to make a sort of mix of musical experiences for the dancers. And eventually I was like, oh, I can mix these two things up. This is really fun.
Cool.
And I ended up doing it quite a lot when I lived in Spain. I was using the recording studios at a university there, and they would have visiting performers come and give a concert. And it was sort of a tradition, at least at that university, that the performer would play something by somebody who was currently working there. So they asked me, hey, there's a guitarist coming. Would you like to write a piece for guitar and electronics for this person? And I was like, that sounds like fun. Sure. And that worked out really well. And then they were like, well, now there's a bass clarinetist coming. Do you want to do that? Because that other piece was really good. And I was like, yes, of course I do. And so it just like, I kept doing these pieces, and eventually people started asking for them, like, oh, I really like that thing that you wrote for this person. Can you write me one? I play soprano saxophone, things like that. So it has just sort of snowballed from that. People realize that they are, that they're fun to play and they sound really different and interesting. And sometimes people want that.
That's awesome. And I will attest that they're fun to play. Your piece for oboe called and electronic soundtrack called Lantana is a piece that I have performed and will perform again this next summer. So, like, enthusiasm from this part of the world.
Yes, I'm so glad you're playing that.
Yeah, I think one more question on this topic, just because I'm reminded of the Bob Dylan biopic that I watched, 2 weeks ago with Timothée Chalamet, and all of the like dramatic pearl clutching around Dylan and his band daring to go electric rather, at a folk festival. And I wonder, have you ever gotten that kind of reaction from the classical world, or in general, have people been super receptive to what you're doing?
Um, in general, people are receptive. I mean, the classical world of orchestras, and, if it's a very traditional situation, like they're not into it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. That's fine. I also write pieces for that do not include electronics. So,
Yeah.
um, it just depends. It just depends on the situation. Um, there are a couple of composers who have been able to work, orchestra with electronics, for instance, but they're very few and far between, and those
Hmm.
pieces are not performed, very often. So it's a heavy lift for a traditional ensemble, and I understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Really, it's really, really interesting. So I know that you also sort of serve your compositional community, if that's a word, like with career coaching and counseling for other composers and
Mm-hmm.
musicians, maybe. And like, first of all, my sort of overarching question is going to be around like, what does it take to make a living as a composer? And then more specifically, how did you discover or like become called to help others in this way, like having reached the level of success that you're at?
Well, the reason I started doing this was because I kept getting questions by younger composers that were like exactly the same questions that I had in my 20s and everything. And that was, 25 years ago. And I'm like, why is this still happening? Why are these exact same questions coming up over and over and over again? Like, there are, even though there are at many conservatories now, there are entrepreneurship classes
Mm-hmm.
for everyone. They're not really tailored for composers.
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit different situation for composers in a way. Just a few of the systems that you need to have set up.
Say
To
say say more about that. Like what? Because when I was in conservatory a gajillion years ago, um, there if there wasn't an entrepreneurship class, or if there was, I didn't take it because I was far too snobby for that. Um, but like, I wonder, what are you seeing that is like educationally appropriate for instrumentalists, not so much for composers? Is there like something you can hone in on? Because I'm interested.
um, well, for instance, composers, it's helpful to join a performing rights organization so that one can receive royalties.
Oh,
That's not something that instrumentalists necessarily do. There are other ways
yeah.
that other organizations that they can join so that they can receive a different kind of royalty
Hmm.
and things like that. So that's a basic example, but
Yeah.
but the kinds of things that performers need, it's a different kind of how you are doing a gig, how you find them, how, it's a little bit different,
Yeah.
for for a, string quartet or a trio of harp, viola, and flute that wants to play weddings than maybe a composer who wants to write for harp, viola,
Yes, that makes
and
it, you
flute.
know, it makes a ton of sense now that you're saying it, because of course, if you're trying to like wrangle yourself gigs as a performer, um, the gigs themselves are ephemeral, so you always need the next gig and the next gig and the next gig, and maybe you like want to get called back by the same ensemble, but you're always looking to just do more. And like, you can tell me if I'm off base. It seems like the profit plan for a composer is a little bit different, because once you've written a piece of music, it continues to exist and you can continue to monetize it in various ways. And so at that point, you're sort of looking for performers, you're looking for ensembles that want to program your own music, and you're looking for more commissions, but each commission like causes you to then have another thing in your portfolio that can later be reused. Am I naming that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Pieces that you write can be performed multiple times,
Hmm.
and they can keep being performed for years and years. I have a piece for soprano, saxophone, and electronics that I wrote for a professional saxophonist, and saxophonists have gotten really good since I wrote that piece, and a lot of students play it now. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I love about that piece and other pieces like that is that, there was one saxophone teacher who really advocated for their students to learn that piece at one school. And then those students went off and became teachers. And then they were like, oh, I love that piece. Here, you're my student now. You play that pieces. So it's been through like generations of saxophone students. And that feels
Amazing.
really beautiful, that
Yeah.
the first guy who started advocating for that is now retired, but there's saxophonists around the country who, still teach that piece and order it, or who just want to play it on a recital, or,
Yeah.
whatever. So that's kind of the way that a single composition can have a life going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time can you like explain very briefly to the listeners, because people probably know this, but like I'm a little bit of a dum dum about it. How do you get paid when somebody else performs your piece?
Oh, okay. Yes, of course. So a composer would be a member of a performing rights organization, which is essentially either ASCAP or BMI. And, we have our pieces registered with them. So when somebody performs a piece, um, we collect the program, or the performer submits it, but usually we collect the program, and let ASCAP or BMI know, hey, this performer played this piece on this date. Here's a
Hmm.
program. Boom. You report it to the
Hmm.
agency, and then once a year, for classical music anyway, or concert music rather, uh, you receive, a royalty payment for the performances that you've had, usually the year before. So
It's a
it's a
long
wait.
game.
It's a long game. Yes, it's a
Yeah.
long game.
And the performers aren't paying to the performing rights organization, but the venue is. Is that correct?
Usually, yes. It depends on the situation. So most of the time, the venue, pays a blanket license to the organization for whatever concerts they have during the
Hmm.
season. There are times when an ensemble would need to pay that, like if they're doing a house concert, for instance, or something like that. But
Right.
more
Where
often,
like the orchestra does a run out to a space that is not an ASCAP
exactly.
space.
Yeah. So in the case of a professional orchestra, they would pay a blanket fee,
Hmm.
and wherever they played, even if it's in their home, if it's their home hall or other halls, yes,
Hmm.
that is taken care of.
Cool. Interesting. Um, and you can stop me if this is too direct a question, but is
Mm.
this like a 1/3 of a penny per stream Spotify kind of situation, or does the money look better than that?
It does look better than that. It depends what it is. That if it's you know a performance from a professional orchestra is much, the royalty payment for that is much larger than a performance by a solo flutist, for
Yeah.
instance. It also depends on the venue. If it's a Carnegie Hall or something fancy, it can be much higher than if it's at, a little performance space in the West Village, for instance.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you
It's
for
it's a
walking me through. Yeah.
it's a bit mysterious. Well, not a bit. It's a lot mysterious. None of
Hmm.
us really know like how exactly it works, but we
Hmm.
do. We do have some some little map to sort of guess.
Yeah. Interesting.
what will be
Interesting.
happening. But yeah,
Yeah. And like as you get more and more advanced throughout your career, of course, like the number of performances grows because people know your music because generations of saxophonists learn the same piece. And so cumulatively it the cumulatively the amount improves year after year, I would guess.
exactly. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What a fun business model. Okay,
Definitely.
so you have, as I said, also begun to coach and consult with other people. How does that work? What does that look like for you?
Um,
And
it's kind of, I kind of tailor it to each person. You know, everybody needs something different. You know, I work with both young emerging composers and older composers who might be retired from their university job and are like, well, what do I do now? You
hmm
know, things like that. So it can be anything, you know, I work with people from anything like setting up with ASCAP and BMI and making sure that their pieces are registered and that they are reporting correctly and enough, you know, so that they can make money from their music. I work on communication skills a lot, you know, how to sort of pitch projects in a way that makes sense for what it is for the person, how to approach different ensembles or institutions. Um, and I work on, you know, sort of the higher level cloudy things too, like procrastination or, you know, stuff like that, you know.
right, why am I having
Yeah,
so much trouble getting this project done?
exactly. Yeah. So it's a variety of nuts and bolts things and then sort of psychological things too, just to, you
Yeah,
know, get more confidence and
yeah,
feel better about artistic life in general, things like that. Yeah.
the kind of mentorship that like that everyone needs, and some people will go their lives just sort of not getting,
Yeah.
not having.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. And does that, like, within the portfolio of your own career, like, do you find, I'm not sure what I'm asking exactly because it's definitely not like asking about a pie chart of your finances. It's not that. I just wonder how the coaching work that you do fits in for you creatively, artistically. Is it like is it more akin to someone dragging themselves to a school to teach 30 lessons in a row to 12-year-olds to like pay the bills, or is it more akin to, ooh, by doing this, I'm exploring thoughts that I have had also? I guess that's sort of my question.
Definitely the latter. You know, I find that with the consulting work, you know, I expand and I contract as needed with my creative projects because it does take, you know, a lot of brain power
Mm-hmm.
since
Yeah.
I'm working with individuals and everybody's different and needs different things. So I'm always, you know, thinking hard about how I can best serve this particular individual. And that takes a lot of creativity. So sometimes if I'm, you know, working hard on a new composition, I will do less, you know, do a little less of the,
Mm-hmm.
you know, consulting just because there is a Venn diagram of those departments, you know, the creative music writing
Yeah.
department and the creative, like helping other people do their thing department. So yeah, I mean, it's great. I definitely do not see it like dragging myself to teach 12 lessons to kids, you know, who may or may not
Excellent.
have practiced and, you know,
Yeah,
but
excellent. Actually, I really just love the little Venn diagram you just drew me with your fingers.
yeah,
That the creative well in the center is sort of the same, whether you're using it to pull music out of your own head or to like help somebody else to pull music out of theirs. And that like feels so resonant for me as well. I get so much energy back and so much learning back when I'm teaching or when I'm coaching, and it's exhausting
Yeah.
for something that I literally do sitting in front of my computer. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's very mentally draining.
Yes. I just did several coachings for MLK Day, free ones as an act of
Hmm.
service to artists that would struggle to afford,
Beautiful.
to pay for it. And I loved it, but boy, was I torched at the end.
Hmm.
It's it can be a heavy lift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I absolutely hear that, and it's important. I'll just name this for our listeners to make sure that you're balancing the the need for money, the need to like reach out and give back to the community, the creative gifts that you are giving to other people with your own creativity and your own artistic fulfillment. And I just love your description of like, I can let it expand, I can let it contract, I can focus on what I need to focus on now, and then like offer more of these. It's beautiful. And it's the benefit of the portfolio career that all of the things you're talking about are sort of within your control. You can say no and you can say
Exactly.
yes, please, more.
Yes, it's true. To be fair, it has taken many, many, many years to, you know, get to that point and
Yeah.
realize that. So that's why I enjoy helping others learn how to do the same. So maybe they don't have to spend so many years like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. I threw a
Lord,
lot of
yes.
spaghetti.
Right? Like
So
that's
much
that
spaghetti.
of course, for me too. And that's the hope. Like, can we make it just this much easier for the next generation to be thriving in their creative careers?
Exactly.
How can we help? Okay, Alex, this is fantastic. It's been so interesting talking with you. Is there anything else that you would like to share here that I haven't made space for in this conversation?
Um, Not really. We covered so many things. It was great. Your questions are so good. I mean, I'm just, I am more open than usual, at this time for dream and scheme sessions. So if there is a composer or even, I do help performers with things too who would like to sign up and like toss around some ideas. I try to, offer my many years of experience and help make things go more easily and quickly for whatever you're trying to do. So I am up for meeting people and doing things through a dream and scheme session.
Wonderful. I will have your website linked in the show notes, but just in case people are not looking at that, where do people find you in the world of the
Yes.
internet?
Thank you. I can be found at my website, which is alexandragardner.net. And that's where I keep all my things, my music and offerings and all the stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.
Awesome.